Chapter 200, Surpassed by None. Chapter 200, Surpassed by None. All cultivators of the noble plain in the eastern barren territory had heard of Xiao Wuji's name. The disciples had told them many times about this man who'd broken many records in the ancient barren world. But the first time they met Xiao Wuji was at the Mirror Mountain stone wall. Naturally, all forces were interested in someone who was known as the most talented of the young cultivators in the eastern barren territory. No one knew who he would choose. Now, all eyes were on Xiao Wuji at the top of Mirror Mountain. The horrible fate, hundreds of meters high, rushed into the stone wall. Then the wall turned transparent. A strange glow covered Xiao Wuji. "What's inside the stone wall?" Yi Futian asked Yi Wuchen out of curiosity. He'd heard that only Yi Wuchen had tried the Mirror Mountain stone wall before. "There's a figure created by noble intent. It clashes and fights with your own intent," Yi Wuchen said. "And it gets stronger. Whenever it defeats a noble, a new one will appear on the wall." Yi Futian's eyes flashed. Yi Wuchen had defeated 2 nobles and failed with the third one. This meant that 2 nobles appeared on the stone wall. How many nobles could Xiao Wuji put onto the wall? Soon, a noble appeared on the smooth mirror-like wall, representing Xiao Wuji's accomplishments. So fast, everyone thought. Clearly, Xiao Wuji had defeated the opponent with extreme speed. After a while, a second noble gradually appeared. Everyone grew anticipatory. With the nobles of the Mirror Mountain stone wall, it grew more difficult as it progressed. It was already difficult to make 2 appear. Only the top figures could make a third appear. As for 4, only the most crazily talented ones of the eastern barren territory could do it. How many could Xiao Wuji make appear? Gradually, a third noble flickered onto the stone wall. It glowed but wasn't solid yet before a terrifying glow enveloped Xiao Wuji. His black hair fluttered and he stood up straight. The noble figure on the stone wall trembled before finally solidifying. The moment that happened, a horrible light rushed into Xiao Wuji's body. According to rumors, when the third noble was imprinted onto the stone wall, the challenger could receive great benefits. It was the feedback from the Mirror Mountain stone wall. Xiao Wuji must have received it. After that, an even more terrifying light enveloped Xiao Wuji. He seemed to be trying again. A fourth noble figure flickered in and out. It was about to be carved onto the wall and something frightening appeared. At that moment, Xiao Wuji seemed to be enduring horrible pressure. His body started trembling. One could guess as to how terrifying the stone wall was. There were many people present but few had completed 3 noble figures. They'd experienced this scene before and understood what Xiao Wuji was going through. Finally, under that horrible sight, a 4th statue appeared. It was branded onto the Mirror Mountain stone wall. An even more dazzling light washed over Xiao Wuji. His entire body shone brightly and brilliantly. The 4th noble. Everyone's hearts trembled. This was the record of the Mirror Mountain stone wall. Only the best of the best had done this before and no one had surpassed them. So powerful. The people were shaken but Xiao Wuji continued to challenge. The situation at the Mirror Mountain stone wall couldn't be described as only frightening now. The strange phenomenon filled the sky, drowning everything. Xiao Wuji's mind was bearing incomprehensible pressure. Finally, there was a muffled sound and he retreated. He couldn't continue challenging. The Mirror Mountain stone wall shone brilliantly and gradually dimmed. The noble figures also disappeared gradually. Even though he had failed, no one looked down on him. They were all impressed. He'd beat 9 drums, left an 8-inch image on the wall, and easily comprehended 3 statues. Tang Yi only said that he was from the college and invited Xiao Wuji. Now, Xiao Wuji agreed. Another top cultivator belonged to the college. A smile appeared in Tang Ye's eyes. He said, "Welcome." Today, he came for Xiao Wuji and the visit was not wasted. Being able to witness this scene was indeed something to be happy about. The other forces all looked disappointed. Of course, the Donghua clan was the most disappointed. After all, they were the top contenders with the college. But this was Xiao Wuji's own choice. No one had forced him, so they could only accept it. Shall we go straight to the college? Tang Yi asked. Okay. Xiao Wuji nodded. He'd already prepared when he came. Then, let's go. Smiling brightly, Tang Yi said, after you. Xiao Wuji strode forward. Everyone subconsciously moved aside. They watched Xiao Wuji and Tang Yi leave together. The two walked to the edge of the Mirror Mountain and down the steps. Tang Yi had come for Xiao Wuji. Now, he left in satisfaction and there were no other problems. Hua Qingqi of Donghua clan looked disappointed. He glanced at Yi Futian's group and left too. They'd given Yi Futian a chance before. Since Yi Futian didn't want them, then whatever. The Sword Saint Mountain, Qianqiu Temple, and Moon Clan all left as well, disinterested. They'd all come for Xiao Wuji today. However, the Futian Sword Clan didn't leave. Li Doyan's expression was sharp as he looked to Yi Futian's group. He wasn't in a hurry. He'd wait for everyone to leave. In his eyes, Yi Futian was already dead. As if a banquet had ended, many people looked dazed and at a loss. It was so great, Gu Biyue said cheerily. Indeed. Yi Futian smiled. Then he started walking somewhere. Gu Biyue was confused. Where was he going? Yi Futian wordlessly walked to the battle drums, standing before the 9 drums. Boom. The first beat was soft. Everyone's eyes flashed at the sound and looked to Yi Futian. With Xiao Wuji's performance, did someone else want to try? It would be so boring in comparison. Boom. The second beat came. Even though everyone heard it, there was still no feeling. Boom, boom, boom. The third, fourth, and fifth beat came. The air started shaking as the beats became louder. Many people of the top forces were going down the steps beside Mirror Mountain. Hearing the drumbeats coming from the mountaintop, they were all shocked. Was someone still beating the drums? They paid no heed and continued descending. Boom, boom. Then the 6th and 7th beats came like thunder. On the stairs, Tang Yi smiled at Xiao Wuji. I wonder who is trying to compete with you. Boom. With the 8th beat, the air shook crazily as if struck with lightning. At the mountaintop, many people looked at Yi Futian. At the moment, his white robes fluttered and his long hair flew. Without stopping, he punched like a dragon. His fist beat onto the drumbeat was like a dragon's cry. Boom. The skies and earth shook together as the drums sounded for the 9th time. The scenery changed. Everyone at the mountaintop looked at Yi Futian, impressed. He was indeed talented. Tang Yi and the others on the steps heard this too. They paused slightly but smiled and continued down. 9 drumbeats were nice but not amazing. Standing before the battle drum, Yi Futian's clothing and hair flew in the wind. He raised his arm once again. Chapter 201, Those Who Know Me Understand My Arrogance. Chapter 201, Those Who Know Me Understand My Arrogance. At the top of the Mirror Mountain, countless eyes looked at Yi Futian, watching as he raised his arm once again. The 9 battle drums had sounded at once, shaking the skies and earth. What was he doing now? This time, Yi Futian's heart was as calm as still water. Powerful strength swept from the drums, rushing into his body. The intent power was terrifying. He could cultivate with this. Yusheng's noble intent had changed here, turning into mid-level noble fate. Yi Futian raised his arm again. Purple lightning cracked terrifyingly above and melded into the intent fate. A dragon's roar streamed faintly from his arm. Under everyone's eyes, Yi Futian's arm went to the drum. The drum sounded again. Boom! With that thunderous crack, the battle drum became one with the intent. In the sky, a dragon roared and lightning danced. It turned into a horrible thunderstorm that swept through the sky. The sky turned into a world of lightning and thunder. Dragons danced. Under this terrifying phenomenon, frightening lightning charged into Yi Futian's body. It bathed him, turning him into a god of thunder. The drums had sounded 10 times. Thunder and lightning had appeared. On the steps, those that were descending stopped. They looked up and saw a crack of lightning flash in the sky. Tang Yi stopped again. Seeing the phenomenon, he finally lost his cool. Who could make the drums beat 10 times? In addition to Tang Yi, many people stopped, trembling inwardly. Even Xiao Wuji was shocked by this scene. The 10th boom was louder than the previous 9. The lightning faded slowly, but the drum's boom still resounded throughout. At the mountaintop, everyone's expressions grew heavy. They gazed in the direction of the battle drums, staring at the white-clothed figure. Lightning washed over him and he seemed to be withstanding horrible pressure. His body was about to explode, his consciousness extinguishing. But he stood up straight as if he would never fall down. The drums quieted. But once the sound dissipated, it would begin again. Under everyone's eyes, Yi Futian raised his arm once again. This was the 11th time. Many hearts trembled at this moment. There was no longer lightning on Yi Futian's arms. Instead, it glowed brilliantly with golden light. He seemed to transform into a golden rock. Horrible intent rushed in and then his arm went to the battle drum. Boom! The 9 sides sounded at once. It was like a tidal wave crashing. Golden light shot up into the clouds. Another phenomenon was created, there seemed to be a golden rock spiral up. This sound beat directly in the hearts of many. The 11th time. Princess Lu Qinyu and Gu Biyue stared at the proud figure standing there. At that moment, he seemed to have become someone else. Just like when he played his Gu Qin, he was like a powerful emperor. Which was the true him, the him right now or the flirtatious one? Lu Qinyu thought of what Yi Wuqian had said and had a strange feeling. Mayhap. She still couldn't believe it, but the battle drums had really been beaten before her eyes. Lin Yueyao gazed at Yi Futian. Was this guy finally starting? As expected, those who had looked down on him would finally see what he was truly like. In the Futian crowd, Li Daoyan's eyes instantly sharpened. What was Yi Futian doing? Was he copying Xiao Wuji to join a top force? On the steps, Tang Yi looked to Xiao Wuji, who looked back at him. Go look? Tang Yi asked. Xiao Wuji nodded. They turned and strode upwards quickly. Not only them, many others also returned to the mountaintop. When they reached the top and stood at the edge of the mirror mountain, they saw the figure clearly. He was bathed in endless golden light and his body was about to be ripped apart and drowned in the windstorm. However, they could see who he was. Only this way would Emperor Luo lose all qualifications to be arrogant. Luo Junlin would never be able to act proudly before him. At the mountaintop, he was absolutely confident in himself. He was only waiting for the right time. And now, with all the top forces present, was the right time. However, Hua Qingqi had told him that he would not have another chance after that. Tang Yi of the college had called him an idiot who didn't know his place. In contrast, Xiao Wuji had shown and all the top forces had waited for him to choose a clan. He could choose any of the top forces of the Eastern Barren Territory. Since that was the case, Yi Futian would tell them all who he was. He wanted them to see his brilliance. Who could break Xiao Wuji's records? He could. He knew that everyone was watching him at this moment. Right now, his white robes fluttered and his long hair flew, complimenting him. He raised his arm again and uttered, "Those who know me understand my arrogance." As soon as the words were spoken, the drums began to beat. The skies and earth shuddered and his sound waves swept through the heavens. Those who know me understand my arrogance. His voice swept through, reverberating in everyone's ears, almost ingrained in their minds with the drumbeats. But this was still not the end. Yi Futian raised his arm again. It is not a waste to abandon those who do not. Boom! The atrium shook and a horrible windstorm blew on everyone's bodies. It was so aggressive. Their clothes flapped while their hearts shook. That voice was too impressive. Those who know me understand my arrogance. It is not a waste to abandon those who do not. He was so arrogant and powerful. He was Yi Futian. Was it over? No. Under his raised arm, the drumbeats filled the sky. The entire world shook and the figure seemed to be eternal. Finally, as the 16th drumbeat sounded, a horrifying intense storm charged at Yi Futian. The 9 drums trembled at the same time and some horrible intent poured into Yi Futian's mind. Boom! With a huge sound, the first drum shattered. Boom, boom, boom. There were continuous explosions. Under their shocked gazes, the 9 drums shattered one after another. Each explosion was heart-stopping. Finally, they shattered and turned to dust. Only that powerful figure remained standing. Light enveloped his body. At that moment, even Yi Futian's backside was so magnificent. Chapter 202, You are not qualified to understand my world. Chapter 202, You are not qualified to understand my world. The drums were cracked but the drumbeats continued reverberating throughout the air. Yi Futian's crazy sound still echoed through the minds of many. At the top of Mirror Mountain, Xiao Wuji had chosen his clan. He stepped onto the mountain for the first time today and revealed unsurpassable talent. He could easily communicate with statues of various elements, leave an image on the wall, beat the 9 drums, and make the noble images appear. Yi Futian beat the drums after Xiao Wuji. To many, he was overestimating his own ability. With Xiao Wuji's example, everyone would seem nondescript. They all thought that no one in the ancient barren world could have Xiao Wuji's talent. The glory he created could not be broken in a long while. Was it true? Before Xiao Wuji even left, Yi Futian used his actions to tell everyone that Xiao Wuji was not unmatchable. He had beaten the drums 16 times and created an abnormal phenomenon, causing the drums' intent to pour out and explode. The drums were now broken but the record was for eternity. This was a true record. Xiao Wuji's record was able to be broken. Countless eyes looked at the silhouette. Yi Futian seemed to still be feeling the intent power pouring into him. His white robe fluttered without wind. Lu Qinyu had a strange look in her eyes. Servant? She glanced at Yi Wuchen beside her. He looked calm as if he didn't find anything strange, as if this should happen. He must be completely confident, Lu Qinyu thought. Yi Wuchen believed that Yi Futian and Yu Sheng's talent was above the top talent of the Eastern Barren Territory. Yi Futian seemed to have proved Yi Wuchen's words from before. At least now, he'd definitely surpassed Xiao Wuji. Lu Qinyu looked over slowly towards where Tang Yi and Xiao Wuji were at. Tang Yi, the wild student of the college, had a strange look in his eyes. Hua Qingche was the same. Those who understand me will understand my arrogance. What is wrong with abandoning those who do not understand me? Was this the reply to them? It was indeed wild enough. You can continue after 9 drumbeats. If you knew this, I'm sure you would do the same, Tang Yi said to Xiao Wuji beside him. Xiao Wuji glanced at the shattered battle drums. This was his first time to the Mirror Mountain and first time beating the drums. After the 9th sound, the drums on the 9 side sounded together. The intent poured out and everything seemed complete. He didn't know one could continue. If he knew, he would have done so. How could he not do what the others could do? Of course. Xiao Wuji nodded. This was confidence in his own abilities, but the drums were broken so he couldn't prove it. Everyone heard him and nodded. Yi Futian had impressed them, but with Xiao Wuji's talent, he could probably do it too. Finally, Yi Futian moved. He rose slowly and walked in another direction. Seeing him, many eyes flashed. He was walking towards the image on the wall. Xiao Wuji had broken the record here. Was he? Many people felt strange. Was this guy repeating Xiao Wuji's steps? Was he serious? Did Yi Futian want to challenge Xiao Wuji? But that wasn't his intention. He'd come to Mirror Mountain to choose a clan. Xiao Wuji had set the precedent, so the easiest way for Yi Futian to reach his goal was to break Xiao Wuji's records. If he did so, no one could doubt him. Of course, perhaps this was just Yi Futian's excuse. His true reason was that he was pissed. He was pissed at Tang Ye's attitude as well as Hua Qingche. Earlier, he didn't refute the other. A vocal refutation meant nothing. What was stronger and simpler than actions? The Donghua clan and college had ignored him because they were fighting for Xiao Wuji. If that was the case, then he had something to show them. The image on the wall shone faintly. The stone was like a mirror. At this moment, Yi Futian stood before a huge boulder. At the mountaintop, everyone stared at him. He became the sole focal point. In reality, he'd taken the witch as a servant, so many people came for him. However, Xiao Wuji came to choose a clan and instantly stole the spotlight. In everyone's eyes, only Xiao Wuji existed. There was no room for anyone else. But now, Yi Futian once again was the center of attention. Could he break Xiao Wuji's record at the image on the wall? The stone glowed dimly and enveloped Yi Futian's body. At that moment, Yi Futian felt his intent get swallowed by the stone. That instant, Yi Futian felt countless intent, all from different strong cultivators. He picked up his feet and walked over. Instantly, countless intent flooded at him. He couldn't endure the extreme pressure for a moment. 1 inch for the image on the wall. Outside, many people saw Yi Futian's image appear, branded onto the stone. Yi Futian continued walking. Soon, the figure sank in 2 inches, 3 inches. At that moment, Yi Futian seemed to understand something. With every step forward, the pressure grew stronger. Not only did the pressure come from the stone's own intent, it also included the intent from people before. The stone tablet was very strange. If you wanted to leave an inch, you needed to face the intent of those who left an inch before. The further you went, the stronger the pressure. If you wanted to break the record, you had to overcome the intent everyone left in the image on the wall. That was why everyone who said that the deeper one's image was, the more terrifying the talent. Breaking the record was like surpassing the power of everyone's intent before him. Not too long later, Yi Futian's image was 7 inches. Many people's hearts trembled and grew nervous involuntarily. The witch Gu Biyue stared at Yi Futian without blinking. 7 inches was the record before Xiao Wuji. Now, Yi Futian had reached this step. How could he be so talented? It seemed that it wasn't embarrassing to lose to him. This guy was indeed terrifying. 7 inches. One more step and he'll be tied to Xiao Wuji. Everyone stared at Yi Futian. At this moment, he took another step. The stone tablet shone with frightening light as if endless intent flew violently at Yi Futian. But he didn't budge at all. Gradually, his image on the wall was 8 inches. He'd tied the record. He had once again done what Xiao Wuji had done. Tang Yi earlier said that Xiao Wuji was unparalleled in the ancient barren world. Was he really? Then what was the Yi Futian that he had embarrassed? Yi Futian didn't show any sign of leaving either. He lifted his foot again and stepped forward. He was about to carve his body into the stone. Yi Futian's image became 9 inches. Xiao Wuji's record was broken by Yi Futian within 2 hours. Everyone was speechless, they didn't know what to say. Even Xiao Wuji's eyes changed. He hadn't tried his hardest with the image on the wall, but Yi Futian had broken his record twice. It was already extremely frightening. Yi Futian was qualified to be seen at the same level as Xiao Wuji. He didn't think that someone else could be so powerful and not belong to any top force. Who is he? Xiao Wuji asked Tang Yi. He rarely cared about others, but he was interested in Yi Futian. Yi Futian, Tang Yi replied. After the 9 inches, Yi Futian stopped. It was enough to break the record. The stone tablet couldn't help him gain anything substantial. So this was enough. Yi Futian walked away from the stone tablet. He returned to the statues area he'd been cultivating at. At this time, Strands of sharp intent descended. The Futian sword clan walked over with Li Daoyun amongst them. They couldn't let Yi Futian continue. He'd already broken 2 records. The other forces were all interested. However, the only force that Yi Futian wouldn't join was the Futian sword clan. Li Daoyun had chopped off Yi Wuqian's arm. How could this hatred be dissolved? Seeing Li Daoyun walk over, Yi Wuqian and Lulan Shui walked before Yi Futian, blocking the Futian sword clan's path. Lu Qinyu and Lu Feiyang also stepped forward, stopping the clan. Seeing that the Futian sword clan was about to act, the various forces all walked over, approaching the statue's area. Tang Yi and Xiao Wuji walked closer too. Seeing Yi Futian stand before a flame statue, Tang Yi said, "Xiao Wuji already reached the limit in this area. It's meaningless to communicate further. If you really want to compete, go prove yourself at the Mirror Mountain stone wall." Tang Yi was clearly interested as well. He didn't feel disdain like before. Yi Futian looked over with a strange expression. "Earlier, you said you don't like how I act," he said. "But that's your business. Now, I really don't like you, so please shut up about my business." Everyone's eyes hardened. Yi Futian was replying to Tang Ye's aggressive words from before. Tang Ye's gaze hardened. He stared at Yi Futian and replied with a sneer, "Even if you're truly talented, the college is still the most suitable place for cultivation. What is the point of cutting off your own path because of your personal feelings? As a second-plane Dharma, you made enemies with the Futian sword clan and took Gu Biyue in as a servant. Have you ever thought of the consequences? Is this not stupidity?" He still didn't think he had said anything wrong. If Yi Futian didn't enter the college, it was his own loss. It had nothing to do with Tang Yi. Stupidity? Yi Futian ignored Tang Yi. He looked at the huge flame statue. Then powerful firelight came from the statue, quickly engulfing him. Then, just like Xiao Wuji earlier, Yi Futian melded into the flame statue's body to feel the sentiment inside the statue. He seemed to be proving that he could do what Xiao Wuji could do. But was that all? The flame statue grew wilder. The spiritual qi in the surrounding environment rushed violently into the statue. Yi Futian's body was completely melded into the statue as if he was part of it. A shocking flame aura flowed. The next moment, a pair of huge eyes flew open. Firelight shot out from those eyes. They were the statue's eyes. That moment, the statue's eyes were filled with vitality. They turned slowly to Xiao Wuji. The next moment, under everyone's shocked gazes, the huge statue actually moved. The enormous flame statue turned around and moved before Tang Yi. Then an extremely overbearing voice came out of the statue. "You are not qualified to understand my world." Chapter 203, Burning Arm. Chapter 203, Burning Arm. A domineering yet impressive voice came out of the statue. It was Yi Futian's voice. At that moment, Tang Ye's expression grew uglier. He'd said that Xiao Wuji had gone to the limit and it was meaningless for Yi Futian to continue. However, had Xiao Wuji really gone to the limit? Then what was Yi Futian doing now? Xiao Wuji could comprehend the statue, but Yi Futian could control it. Tang Yi had called Yi Futian an idiot twice, but why? Yi Futian was in the second-level Dharma plane but had done things outside of his ability. He couldn't handle the Futian sword clan and couldn't anger the witch clan. These two forces could both kill him in the ancient barren world. So in his opinion, Yi Futian was an idiot. No one could refute him. Even though Yi Futian had displayed absolute brilliance, he still didn't think he said anything wrong. Yi Futian was an idiot. But now, Yi Futian had controlled the statue. Who could say that the Futian sword clan and witch clan could definitely kill him? Yi Futian's "you are not qualified to understand my world" was a slap to his face. Was Yi Futian an idiot or was he ignorant? Lu Qinyu and Gu Biyue were shocked, their hearts beating madly. Earlier, Xiao Wuji had quickly comprehended 3 statues consecutively and entered the statues to cultivate. They'd naturally thought that Xiao Wuji was better than Yi Futian. It was because Yi Futian had stayed longer in the area but didn't reach Xiao Wuji's level. Now, they finally understood why Yi Futian stayed in that area, studying each statue. He'd already tried quietly to control the statues, doing something no one had ever done without anyone realizing. They'd doubted his talent, but he already had ideas. He'd struck the battle drums 16 times and then they exploded. He'd left a 9-inch image on the wall, breaking the record. He could control the statues. Yi Futian had completely defeated Xiao Wuji in the 3 relics. Earlier, everyone was still shaken by Xiao Wuji's talent and thought that no one could surpass him. But after such a short period, someone walked out and was even more brilliant. The battle drums had shattered, his record was for eternity. He could directly control the statues. Who could surpass that? This was a true record, an unbeatable record. Countless eyes stared at the giant body of flames, their hearts shaking. Had someone more talented than Xiao Wuji truly appeared? And it was someone who'd been overlooked all this time, humiliated by Tang Yi. It was so ironic. The statue was still facing Tang Yi. It uttered, "Do not use your scale to measure me. You do not qualify." Tang Yi's expression grew uglier. He couldn't refute it. The things he'd said earlier were truly based off of his own mindset and level. It shouldn't be a problem, but the man before him now was an outlier. Also, you said I had cut off my own path. Are you sure you can represent the college? Yi Futian continued. Tang Yi paled considerably. Yi Futian's words had gone straight into his gut. His talent had surpassed Tang Yi and even Xiao Wuji. At this time, could Tang Yi really represent the college? Obviously not. If Yi Futian's performance at the Mirror Mountain stone wall was as impressive as in these 3 relics, if he would beat Xiao Wuji's record again, all the top forces would fight for him. What did it matter if Tang Yi disliked him at that time? Could Tang Yi represent the college? He had no right to choose Yi Futian. At that time, Yi Futian would be the one choosing, just like Xiao Wuji. In addition to Tang Yi, Li Daoyun also looked aghast. Back then in the ancient Lulan relic, he'd been so arrogant. He'd been so powerful and looked down at Yi Futian. But now, he saw the true Yi Futian. He definitely did not imagine that Yi Futian would be so powerful. None of the 4 strong cultivators at the Lulan relic had expected this. However, the other 3 forces only wanted to fight over the treasures and didn't have any deep rivalries. Li Daoyun, on the other hand, had taken Yi Wuqian's arm. With Yi Futian's talent, once he joined a top force, Li Daoyun would become his mortal enemy. Plus, Lu Qinyu had already sided with Yi Futian against him. He had pursued Lu Qinyu before. Even though she didn't answer him, there was still hope. Now, when he wanted to fight Yi Futian, Lu Qinyu had walked up and was full of cold animosity. Looking at that beautiful face, he sighed inwardly. When he gazed at Yi Futian, the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. "Let him come," Yi Futian said. Lu Qinyu and Lu Lanshui glanced at the statue and moved aside. Li Daoyun's gaze shot towards the statue and stepped forward. With one step, he shot into the air and landed before Yi Futian. "You told me you're waiting for me. So it seems that this is your confidence," Li Daoyun said to Yi Futian. Yi Futian didn't speak. The flame intent was to the extreme on the statue. In the lower ancient barren world, the Dharma plane is the limit, Li Daoyun said. Even if you can control the statue, your actual cultivation will only be the Dharma plane, but the power of the will isn't restricted. I have noble intent. I've fought against a true noble in the ancient Lulan relic. I'd like to see what you can do with this statue. Enough, Yi Futian said. He understood what Li Daoyun was doing. There was a limit to the lower ancient barren world. No matter how powerful the statue was, it was the flame intent that was actually powerful. His statue's body could swallow the flame spiritual chi in the world but would still be restricted to the Dharma plane. But wasn't it enough for him to be at the pinnacle of the Dharma plane? Li Daoyun stood atop his sword in the air. The sword chi filled the air. He was holding the ritual implement sword that he'd received in the Lulan relic. His sword started dancing and the skies changed. Powerful sword intent burst in his body. All the spiritual qi in the world converged, transforming into sword qi. Li Daoyun was very serious. His personality was wild, but seeing Yi Futian's talent, he didn't dare underestimate him. He used all his power. If he could, he would kill Yi Futian on the spot. He hadn't joined any force yet. If Yi Futian was killed, no one would be able to say anything. Various afterimages formed. Countless images of Li Daoyun appeared in the sword qi. It was like his Dharma's ability. The countless figures all wielded their swords at once and the sword qi strengthened. The windstorm was about to destroy everything. It seemed that only swords remained in that sky. Yi Futian's statue burst with horrible fire. It clenched its fists and its body burned furiously. It was like a furnace, able to melt the entire world. Li Daoyun finally moved. The countless afterimages moved together. At that moment, there seemed to be rivers of swords in the sky, flowing to Yi Futian. Li Daoyun guided the sword river forward. He floated lightly like a cloud but left behind the fatal swords. Boom! In the sky, horrible flames exploded, and wind blew through the sky. Countless flaming maple leaves appeared. They danced with the wind and swept towards Li Daoyun. With rustles, the horrible flaming maple leaves glowed with golden light. Like inextinguishable fire, they burned away Li Daoyun's afterimages to nothing. In the distance, the sky actually burned with golden fire. The world of fire created by the maple leaves engulfed the sword river, destroying it all. The statue's sorcery. Xiao Wuji's eyes flashed as he looked at the maple leaves. Many afterimages were burned, but one was able to slice apart the sky. The maple leaves all died away under his sword. That was the true Li Daoyun, fighting his way over to Yi Futian's statue. A swordsman's close combat ability was honestly terrifying. But just then, Yi Futian closed his palms. The giant hands of his statues were extremely quick, as if predicting the path of Li Daoyun's sword. The statue's hands closed around the sword. "You're gonna die," Li Daoyun uttered coldly. His sword was a ritual implement. How could Yi Futian capture it with his hands? Sword qi erupted, destroying everything. The furnace-like hands were about to shatter as well. His sword was the sharpest weapon in the world and it stabbed towards the statue. The palm crumbled bit by bit. At the same time, horrible fire crept onto Li Daoyun's arm. It kept going, about to seep into Li Daoyun's body. "Break!" Li Daoyun roared. The sword qi shattered the statue's arms and then angled up to the head. But almost simultaneously, his body suddenly lit up with countless fire prints. They were like holy fire, and pain arrived. His body was about to burn up. His sword-wielding hand trembled and his arm shone with golden flames. His face paled. Instead of continuing the attack, he chose to retreat decisively. In this battle, he would kill if he could; if he couldn't, he would retreat. There was no reason to fight to the death. "Give me an arm," Yi Futian said coldly. The statue's eyes were just like his own. Horrible fire intent shot out from those strange fiery pupils. Then Li Daoyun's arm seemed to set on fire. An ancient fire rune appeared. "Ah!" There was a horrible pained cry. The sword in Li Daoyun's hands fell shakily. He stared at his right arm. It was burning without stop. Chapter 204, Arrived. Chapter 204, Arrived. The arm burned to nothing in the fire. Li Daoyun screamed endlessly. If it was a sword, it would only be an instant of pain, but his arm was burning down bit by bit. The pain was unimaginable. When the flame extinguished, Li Daoyun's sword intent went wild. His eyes were crazed. The people of the Futian sword clan all came up to him. Sword intent swept over, crushing towards Yi Futian. The spectators were all shocked, their hearts trembling. No wonder Yi Futian was reckless. After melding into the statue, he'd already possessed the top ability of the Dharma plane. Li Daoyun wasn't the strongest of the Futian sword clan, but he was still reputable. Only a few clan members of the same age could surpass him. His talent was undeniable, but he was forced to burn his arm. The statue's eyes seemed to be Yi Futian's. It glanced at Li Daoyun and said coldly, "You are so weak. How dare you act so manic?" Li Daoyun looked up. Sword intent shot out from his eyes. He glared at the figure before him. Back then in the Lulan relic, he'd been so domineering and would never have thought of this scene. The Futian sword clan's disciples went forward. Sword intent filled the sky. Yi Futian's gaze swept past everyone and he said coldly, "Li Daoyun damaged my brother's arm in the ancient barren world, so I took my revenge. If you want to kill me, then try. If you can't, don't blame me." As soon as he finished, terrifying fire spiritual chi converged on that arm. The statue's hands that had been chopped off by the sword aura were reborn, created by pure fire spiritual chi. Feeling the terrifying flame intent, the Futian sword clan all looked uncomfortable. Amongst those who had come, Li Daoyun was the strongest, but his arm was burned easily. The others were even weaker than Yi Futian. "Let's go," Li Daoyun uttered. He lifted the sword with his right and turned to leave. The other clansmen stared deeply at Yi Futian and then left with Li Daoyun. Li Daoqing looked the worse. He'd definitely never imagined that the one he called a slave would humiliate the Futian clan and burn his brother's arm. If Yi Futian chose to join a strong force, this revenge would be difficult. Seeing the Futian sword clan leave, Yi Futian returned to the statue. Then he walked out. Everyone looked at his handsome features and extraordinary temperament a bit differently now. Before, Yi Futian was an extremely talented but overconfident genius. Now, he was a top genius, equal to Xiao Wuji. After a few years, he would enter a higher plane and could compete with the top geniuses of all the top forces. No one spoke. Yi Futian had gone through Xiao Wuji's 3 main relics and had surpassed him in all. Now, only the Mirror Mountain stone wall remained. Everyone waited quietly. They wanted to see just how many noble figures Yi Futian could display at the wall. At this time, all the important figures of the various forces could witness his talent. However, after a while, they discovered that Yi Futian actually sat down before another figure and started cultivating. There was no sign of him going to the stone wall. Everyone had a strange expression. All of the people on the mountain were waiting for him to display his talent, but now he was cultivating. Gu Biyue blinked and gaped at Yi Futian. Yu Sheng was embarrassed. This guy was doing it again. Even Yu Sheng couldn't stand it. He was too shameless. Everyone waited, but Yi Futian continued his cultivation as if he didn't know. Many grew impatient. This guy was breaking Xiao Wuji's record. Halfway through, only the stone wall, the most important part, was left, but he stopped to cultivate. What did this mean? What's going on? Lu Feiyang, prince of the Lu kingdom, asked his sister. Lu Qinyu's eyes flashed. "I don't know." With that, she glanced at Yi Wuchen in confusion. "Don't look at me," Yi Wuchen said, walking forward. "Just get used to it." The Lu siblings blanched. "Are you interested in joining the Donghua clan?" Hua Qingqi invited. Even if Yi Futian didn't pass the stone wall test, the talent he displayed was enough. "I haven't thought about it," Yi Futian replied with a smile. "Okay." Hua Qingqi nodded without saying more. Everyone thought that Yi Futian hadn't decided to choose a clan today. They started cultivating throughout the relic and stopped looking at Yi Futian. Some people left, but people from each force remained. As for Yi Futian's group, they cultivated without distractions. There were so many relics on the mountaintop. It was enough for them to cultivate for a while and improve themselves. Other than Yi Futian, Yu Sheng and Yi Wuchen were able to improve too. The days passed. Yi Futian's group improved bit by bit. Countless months later, they'd all risen in stage. Yi Wuchen had crossed into the 6th level Dharma plane. Yi Futian and Yu Sheng had entered the 3rd level. The mountaintop was always busy during these days. People kept coming to see the legendary figures who endlessly broke records. You've studied all the relics here. Are you still not planning on going to the stone wall? Gu Biue asked Yi Futian now. What are you in a hurry for? Yi Futian asked, looking at her. The witch had been very obedient these past days and always stayed by his side. When people from the witch clan came, she would make them leave. I want to bring you into the witch clan, Gu Biue said, smiling. Her eyes were mesmerizing. What's so good about the witch clan? Yi Futian asked. Both the Donghua clan and college were better than the witch clan. In fact, even the Lu kingdom was more promising. Me. Gu Biue smiled gorgeously and said, if you join, I'll serve you forever. How about that? Yi Futian looked at her mesmerizing eyes and said indifferently, fulfill your duties as a servant and don't overthink. Beauty traps weren't effective on him. Gu Biue looked at him with resentment. She looked hurt and pitiful. At that time, a group came to the Mirror Mountain from the barren city. The people in the front weren't too powerful but had an extraordinary temperament. One of the girls, especially, covered her face but everyone could tell from her aura and figure that she was definitely a beauty. There was a small smile in her eyes. She'd finally found information on that guy. He'd made such a big commotion in the barren city. Her voice was so gentle, it could break the hearts of all men. She was plucking at everyone's heartstrings. Hearing her gentle voice and seeing those love-filled eyes so close, Yi Futian's heart had already melted. He actually began to feel ashamed, despite not doing anything bad. I missed you. This simple phrase was more lethal than all the words in the world. Chapter 206, Murderous Intent of the Royal Xian Temple. Chapter 206, Murderous Intent of the Royal Xian Temple. At the mountaintop, countless eyes looked to that horribly beautiful figure. That gentle voice even softened their hearts. How could Yi Futian get with other girls when he had someone like her? Everyone looked at Yi Futian in jealousy and envy. But seeing Yi Futian's handsome face and his talent, they actually seemed to fit each other. It was as if they were born to be together. When Lulan Shui saw this, she lowered her head slightly. Her mother had said that the feelings would develop over time. Men were disloyal and she was so amazing. Yi Futian would quickly forget about the girl he loved. She didn't think anything at the time but vaguely felt that her mother was right. But now, Lulan Shui realized her mother was wrong. The girl that he loved was much, much better than her mother had imagined. No wonder he refused no matter how she forced him to marry Lulan Shui. Behind Hua Jieyu, Yi Lingxi and Yi Danchen exchanged glances. The scene they'd imagined didn't happen. Instead, Hua Jieyu's gentle voice melted everyone. Yi Lingxi smiled faintly. Perhaps only someone like Hua Jieyu could control Yi Futian. Yi Futian gazed at the pretty eyes right before him. His heart had melted. Reaching out, he cupped Hua Jieyu's face in his hands. I missed you too. He was speaking the truth. He'd prepared to finish everything before the end of the year and return to Kangyi but didn't expect that Jieyu would take the risk and come to find him in the ancient barren world. Hua Jieyu smiled sweetly and glowed brilliantly. She looked to the side at Gu Biue and Lulan Shui. Then she lowered her head as if feeling bad. Did I do something wrong? She raised her head slowly and gazed imploringly. No. Yi Futian felt tenderness from the bottom of his heart at Hua Jieyu's appearance. Oh. Hua Jieyu seemed to get over it. Smiling brightly, she said, then tell me whatever you want to do and I'll agree. Okay. Yi Futian nodded and looked to Gu Biue. She's Gu Biue. She lost to me in a challenge and agreed to be my servant but she's not obedient. Don't mind what she just said. She did it on purpose. Oh, you don't have to explain. I trust you, Hua Jieyu said gently. Gu Biue looked at Hua Jieyu. She suddenly understood why her beauty trap always failed. It wasn't that she wasn't attractive enough but that someone else was too foxy. You're not needed anymore. Forget about the challenge. You may leave, Yi Futian said to her. Gu Biue looked at him pitifully. You're going to abandon me just like this? Get out. Yi Futian's face darkened. Was she causing trouble purposefully? Gu Biue smirked and said to him, fine. You win. Then she walked away, but not before glancing at Hua Jieyu. I met Lulan Shui at Lulan City. We partnered up while in the relic. I met Lin Yueyao long ago at the Qianmeng city and trained together in the ancient barren world. Yi Futian explained everything honestly. Okay. Hua Jieyu smiled gently and said, I heard that there are a lot of noble relics here. I saw many on the road these days and improved a bit. Teach me. All right. Yi Futian nodded and said, these statues contain intent of various elements. Each one represents a different element. Do you have noble fate yet? If not, we can go somewhere else to take it. Almost. I went through the noble grotto in the Qianmeng area. I heard you three caused quite a stir there. Hua Jieyu grinned. Did you go onto the corridor? Yi Futian asked. Yeah. Hua Jieyu nodded. My fox is so talented. Yi Futian chuckled. Let's go somewhere else to get the fate and then return here. Whatever you say, Hua Jieyu replied. They held hands and walked away to cultivate at another relic. Everyone stared at them, speechless. Were they in their own world? Yu Sheng looked at all of them. He was quite calm since he was used to it. Lu Chenyu had an odd look. Was this one thing against another? Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu really went to cultivate somewhere. Yi Futian guided and helped Hua Jieyu comprehend. Gu Biue and Lin Yueyao watched this with resentment. The difference was so big. No one had ever been treated like this before. Did he see us? Yi Danchen asked Yi Lingxi. Of course, Yi Lingxi said, chuckling. But he doesn't have time to talk to us. Yi Danchen was annoyed. They'd come so far. It wasn't easy. But then he was overlooked. Yi Futian didn't even greet them. Yi Danchen was so sad. Ugh, let's go cultivate too. There are many relics here, he said, sighing. He couldn't expect to be treated like Hua Jieyu. He could only cultivate alone. Many people had been watching Yi Futian cultivate alone and waited quietly. In the following days, they started watching him cultivate with Yi Futian. Hua Jieyu's life spirit had evolved and become stronger with the Imperial Advisor's help. Her talent had upgraded as well. As a full attribute mandate sorcerer that focused on spiritual sorcery, she could comprehend all sorts of relics. With Yi Futian's help, she quickly created noble fate. Of course, this was because she also accumulated much fate before. But to Yi Futian, this wasn't enough. He continued to help Hua Jieyu, bringing her to various statues. She could comprehend all types of intent and improved every day. In addition, Yi Futian, Yu Sheng, Yi Wuchen, and everyone else were all improving and getting stronger. Time continued to pass by. The commotion created by Yi Futian and Xiao Wuji gradually calmed down. Fewer and fewer people mentioned it. Yi Futian was busy with his girlfriend and didn't think about the Mirror Mountain stone wall. When did he plan on choosing a clan? The majestic Royal Xian Temple in the Eastern Barren Territory seemed to be in the clouds. At the moment, a young man stood at the edge of a pavilion with his hands behind his back. He watched the rolling clouds. One could see far if one stood up high. Standing in the Royal Xian Temple and looking down, one's heart would feel more open. One would feel mighty. Junlin, what are you doing? A gentle voice said. The young man looked over and saw a beautiful girl walk towards him. She looked at the man gently. Thinking of something, the man said. You've just come out of seclusion and broke into a new plane. What is there to be worried about? The girl smiled tenderly. The young man was Luo Junlin, Crown Prince of the Nanda Nation. After coming to cultivate at the Royal Xian Temple, he grew uninterested in his position as prince. Even though the position belonged to him and everyone in Nanda knew, he could give it away. The outside world was so incredible. In this mighty era, all forces in the Eastern Barren territory were fighting each other. Talents were everywhere. Being the emperor didn't satisfy him anymore. As an emperor, he would be in a high position and could do whatever he wanted. However, it was meaningless to enjoy that authority and glory. He didn't want it. Now, he'd already entered the Arcana plane and would soon enter the Noble plane. The Nanda nation was nothing to him. Luo Junlin embraced the girl while still looking at the sea of clouds. He murmured, "I wish to return at the end of the year. I can't be assured unless some things are taken care of. Is it still that matter?" The girl gazed at him and said, "What about someone in the glory plane can worry you? Just kill him. He's quite talented. Now that the ancient barren world is open, he may possibly cultivate and snatch the noble fate. He'll be taken in by some top force," Luo Junlin said. This was why he came to the royal Xian temple. No matter how talented he is, you don't have to worry even if he's lucky to enter a top force. The girl smiled. "If you really are worried, I can ask my father to let me bring some men with me on a trip. How can a small country's emperor stop me? Don't disturb him because of my personal matters." "I'll go back myself this time," Luo Junlin said. "Then I'll tell my father that I'll go with and have a senior go too." "We can help you," she said gently. "Will master agree?" Luo Junlin was unsure. "Father loves you. He'll definitely agree. When you enter the noble plane, we'll be married. I'll go see your family this time. Father won't refuse." The girl grinned and Luo Junlin nodded. "Thank you, but if he doesn't agree, then just forget it." "He won't." The girl leaned into Luo Junlin's arms. He continued staring at the clouds, sharpness flashing past his eyes. He thought of the arrogant figures at the Tingfeng banquet. How were they now? Were they in the ancient barren world now? With their talents, they could become powerful after cultivating a bit more. Sadly, they wouldn't have the chance to mature. This time, he would end this matter before anything could happen. He would kill the threat before it could be born. Ever since he entered the royal Xian temple, he moved forward furiously. He cultivated madly and even won over his master's daughter. There were too many powerful cultivators at the royal Xian temple. If he wanted to climb higher than the others, he must work harder. After countless months of secluded cultivation, he'd entered the Arcana plane. He was one step closer to becoming a noble. By this time, everyone was already looking over at her. Deep down, they felt as if the thing they had long anticipated was about to come true. In front of the Mirror Mountain stone wall, Hua Jieyu released her fate. Noble fate of all elements rushed out and climbed high into the sky. Hearts pounded and everyone looked dumbstruck at the scene ahead. The multi-elemental noble fate that radiated off of Hua Jieyu's beautiful figure was upper-level fate. The witch, Gubiue, never left Mirror Mountain. Also watching Hua Jieyu was Lulan Shui. This was when both females realized that Hua Jieyu's beauty was not the only reason Yi Futian was wrapped around her fingers. This powerful female was the reason Yi Futian never paid other women any attention. Lin Yueyao was dazed. Was the gap between her and Hua Jieyu really that big? If that jerk, Yi Futian, would have helped her like he did with Hua Jieyu, Lin Yueyao could very likely have acquired noble fate already. Very quickly, the first noble figure appeared. Then, the second. Everyone could feel the heavy pounding of their hearts. They felt it deep down. Something big was about to happen. Hurry and notified the people of the clan, ordered someone from a great power. Many of his fellow clan members scurried. Their status was not enough to persuade Yi Futian and the others to join their clan. "It's too late," said someone else. Nobody expected Yi Futian's group to make their move so suddenly. There was no hint and they definitely did not give out a specific time beforehand as Xiao Wuji did. The Mirror Mountain stone wall glowed with a bright light. The light grew brighter and brighter until the third noble appeared, sending a shiver down everyone's back. Another genius cultivator who was able to make 3 nobles appear. She also possessed upper-level fate. On top of that, she also seemed to be a full attribute sorcerer. Hua Jieyu challenged a 4th figure, but just like Yi Wuchen, she failed in the end. Looking up at the stone wall, she spoke softly, "Kangyi Kingdom, Hua Jieyu." Another one from the Kangyi Kingdom. Everyone was shocked. Yi Danshan and Yi Lingxi felt a squeeze in their hearts. The siblings exchanged a glance filled with shock. They shared a realization: the Kangyi Kingdom was about to become famous. Hua Jieyu returned beside Yi Futian and was met with a bright smile. Then, Yu Xing stepped out from Yi Futian's side. He also stopped in front of the stone wall. Do they plan to keep going? Spectators had their gazes frozen on the large figure. Yu Xing released his fate, the will of strength, metal, and wind were released. All of the noble level. Another person with upper-level fate. The people were now desensitized to this. Both Yu Xing and Hua Jieyu were only in the 3rd-level noble plane but were both in possession of upper-level noble fate. When had it become so easy to acquire noble fate? The Mirror Mountain stone wall glowed again, its light blanketing over Yu Xing. Mere moments later, the first noble figure appeared. Will he also make 3 figures appear? Everyone's thoughts were running wild. Was there going to be 4 freakishly powerful people from one batch of visitors who were able to make 3 noble figures appear? Not too long after, a second figure appeared. Bystanders took a deep breath. He should have no problem with a 3rd figure. Just as they expected, a 3rd figure appeared on the Mirror Mountain stone wall a while after. Yu Xing basked in the strong, bright light emitted off the wall. What's going on today? All the people on the mountaintop were rendered speechless. Gu Biyue's eyes sparkled in amazement while Lu Qinyu's heart pounded loudly. This whole group of people was freakishly gifted. On the stone wall, the faint image of the 4th figure flickered. But nobody cared too much this time around, seeing that Yi Wuchen and Hua Jieyu had been able to do the same before and had both ended in failure. It was most likely going to end the same for this person. Even so, everything these 3 people had accomplished had already shocked everyone around. Slowly, the 4th noble figure's image became clearer. The flickering of the image became shorter, seemingly stabilizing. "Look!" shouted a spectator. "This is not possible." Everyone stared at the stone wall. The image of the 4th figure was becoming more and more opaque. And just like that, in front of their very eyes, the 4th noble figure appeared, imprinted on the stone wall. This. Many people were extremely surprised. Making 4 noble figures appear on the Mirror Mountain stone wall was something only top-level geniuses could do. And now, Yu Xing had also accomplished this. Furthermore, he was only at the 3rd-level Dharma plane. "Kangyi Kingdom, Yu Xing," he shouted loudly. Everyone jumped at his volume. "Kangyi Kingdom, Yi Wuchen. Kangyi Kingdom, Hua Jieyu. Kangyi Kingdom, Yu Xing. In the name of Kangyi." The 2 flame bodies walked towards each other with shocking firelight. The body of the Demon King and the body of the Sun Furnace crashed. Fire flowed wildly. At that moment, Yi Futian understood something. The first intent he'd released after entering was flame intent, so the flame intent here grew stronger. Now, such a terrifying king appeared. It contained noble-level flame techniques and clashed against his intent. No wonder Yi Wuchen had been defeated the first time. The second time, he'd clearly surpassed his limits with his sword and made the 3rd figure appear on the stone wall. Since Yi Wuchen could do it, Yi Futian wouldn't use his emperor's intent either. He used his own abilities to battle against the flame intent. He didn't even use other elements. He knew that having noble intents of various elements would give him an advantage here. Various flame runes gradually appeared on the Demon King. They stacked atop each other and glowed faintly. They gradually began burning on his body and grew even brighter. They were dazzling. Gradually, the entire Demon King burned. The huge body transformed into 3 ancient runes. Finally, it turned into formless power and rushed into Yi Futian's body. That moment, the third figure appeared on the stone wall outside. At the same time, the formless power surged into his body. Starting from the third figure, he could gain something from each one that appeared. It's the third one. Countless eyes stared at the one standing before the stone wall. With only one more figure, he'd be tied with Xiao Wuji, the record holder. That step was difficult, but once he did so, everything would be different. Yu Sheng had done so, but he wasn't more brilliant than Xiao Wuji before. Thus, the people just thought that Yu Sheng was talented but wasn't as powerful as Xiao Wuji. However, they'd all seen Yi Futian's performance at the other 3 relics. If he could tie with Xiao Wuji's record here, it would mean something more. At this moment, another figure transformed by intent appeared before Yi Futian in the void. It shattered immediately, and then various flame figures appeared around him. Each one contained extreme noble intent. Yi Futian trembled inwardly. No wonder so many prides were stuck here, unable to go on. If he could succeed, he could be the best of the best. These figures attacked directly at once. In an instant, the entire world turned into a world of fire. It destroyed everything and drowned the void. Yi Futian saw this and felt his will drown into nothingness. Yi Futian looked up. His eyes flashed sharply, and in an instant, a strong ice seal bloomed. It turned everything into a world of ice and fought against the fire. The terrifying fire broke apart the ice and continued towards Yi Futian. A cold moon appeared behind Yi Futian. It emanated shocking eerie coldness. All fire in its path was extinguished. A horrible icy storm was swept up. Everything froze where the moon shone down on. But the fire nobles were so terrifying. The fire transformed into rivers of lava that flowed on the ice, continuing to sweep towards Yi Futian. More terrifying flame figures charged into the ice world, slapping down on Yi Futian with palms of fire. Boom! Yi Futian strode through the world of ice. A staff of ice and snow appeared in his hands. It shone with gold light. Not only did it contain ice intent, it also had the strength of metal and earth. He waved his hands and the staff twirled. It created a windstorm that swept through. He stepped forward. Like a demon ape, he swept his staff and instantly shattered the noble intent, destroying it. An even more terrifying power burst from him. He charged forward, waving his staff. The 9 heavenly attacks swept past everything, continuing to strengthen. Booms sounded endlessly. Soon, the flame figures all shattered and finally turned into nothing. The world returned to peace. Another gust of formless power surged into Yi Futian from the stone wall as if giving him some benefits. At the same time, a 4th noble figure flickered onto the stone wall. The 4th figure appeared. At that moment, countless hearts shuddered. Yi Futian had done it. With his full attribute talent, he'd made 4 noble figures appear on the stone wall, and he'd surpassed Xiao Wuji in 3 areas. Another future top figure of the Eastern Barren territory was born in the ancient Barren world. Is it too late? People from the top forces trembled inwardly. They didn't have people from their clan here. Yi Futian had acted suddenly and no one was prepared. Could they make Yi Futian choose them now? What they didn't know was that some noble figures from each top force were also watching this, feeling shaken. What was with today? 4 strong cultivators had come to the Mirror Mountain stone wall today, one after another. 2 had made 3 noble figures appear, 2 had made 4. They'd all come from the Kangi kingdom. At this moment, everyone in the top level was asking what was with these people from the Kangi kingdom. They were wondering, can they join us? It was entirely possible that 5 noble figures was the maximum at the Mirror Mountain stone wall. Yi Futian also had the wind of will around his body. He could move around very quickly. At the same time, in the skies behind him, the sun and the moon hung high. The flames and the ice alternated. A terrifying force of flame will was released, forming ancient characters that floated in the air. A golden divine flame attacked and met the incoming vines, burning them to a crisp. Yi Futian's opponent was formed from full attributed noble will, and he was the same. The moonlight shined down and cooled the temperature down to the point of freezing, wanted to seal the approaching figure in ice. The cold and the heat alternated. The flames and the ice were like yin and yang, working together to strangle the opponent. Boom! The figure took a step forward. A frightening force of spiritual will exploded and a terrifying force could be felt pushing down onto Yi Futian. All he knew was that his body felt extremely heavy. Above the figure, there seemed to be a flow of water. The running sounds of the water were endless. The powerful spell that Yi Futian targeted at the figure followed the flow of the water back to himself. The look in his opponent's eyes became terrifying. A spiritual spell descended upon Yi Futian, and at that moment, he felt as if his body was trapped in a cage of spiritual energy. Just then, the same terrifying look was seen in Yi Futian's eyes. A horrifying spiritual storm seemed to have washed over his opponent's spiritual will and absorbed all the spiritual energy. The entire area filled with an endless golden light. The rays of light were like fragments of gold. With the wind, these fragments shot towards the figure. The golden light was like a metal storm that wanted to crush Yi Futian's opponent into pieces. Just like maple flames, this was a spell he got from enlightenment by the statues. Another loud thump was heard when the figure took another step forward. An even scarier force of power erupted and the world seemed to have been put on pause. The metal storm that circled wildly actually stopped moving in the air. Yi Futian also seemed to be frozen in place. Had the figure perfectly merged noble will and sorcery? It was no wonder why no one was able to beat the record of 4 noble figures. To make a 5th figure appear was an obstacle set by the heavens. These were the true limits, a boundary not to be passed. But Yi Futian refused to believe so. There were no limits. Limits were meant to be broken. Behind him, golden rock wings appeared. His body was fluid and majestic like a dragon. He grew big and tall like a divine ape, ready to amaze the world. The sun and the moon hung high in the sky, destroying what was below. Yi Futian's spiritual will exploded and he was like a young emperor. With the long rod in hand, he struck directly in the air ahead. A dull noise sounded and a force gathered in the surrounding area. He continued to step forward looking fiercer than ever before. He must break through the gravity spell weighing down on him. Witnessing this scene, the figure released the light of lightning which spread throughout the sky. The lightning attacked right away, striking down on Yi Futian. Infused with noble will, the lightning wanted to destroy Yi Futian's will. However, his will was firm right now. He allowed the lightning to strike down on him. In his hand, the long rod danced and the power of the lightning was attracted onto the rod. When he swung his weapon again, the air around him seemed to have split. The sun and the moon, yin and yang, descended on the figure. Yi Futian continued to advance. Another attack. He was making a path for himself by cutting through the air. The force of power from the figure grew even more horrifying. It was as if it was ready to eliminate everything on Earth and wipe out the universe. Boom! With a loud noise, Yi Futian lifted into the air. In the air, he looked like a god. The long rod struck downward. The roar of the divine ape, the growl of the divine dragon, and the arrival of the divine rock. The figure lifted his head and then transformed into a ray of light. All types of will revolved around him like he was the ultimate noble. Up him went, headed straight for Yi Futian. When the two bodies collided, a blinding light shined over the world. Away from this scene, countless pairs of eyes were focused on the Mirror Mountain stone wall and the figure in front of it. They saw a terrifying force release from Yi Futian. His noble fate rushed crazily into the stone wall and his mental state seemed to be pushed to the limits. He was still challenging the Mirror Mountain stone wall's 5th noble figure. However, it seemed like the figure would never make an appearance. The faint image of it came and went and showed no signs of stabilizing. He's still fighting. He hasn't given up, someone murmured. Looks like he's not willing to admit defeat. He wants the challenge. Xiao Wuji had done the same before, but in the end, he thought it was impossible for a fifth noble figure to ever appear. Everyone was in discussion. Some were even trying to determine which clan Yi Futian would choose to join. The Donghua clan? The college? Or was it going to the Qin dynasty or the Lu kingdom? Just as they were deep in discussion, the world around suddenly grew brighter. There was actually an extremely bright light coming from the Mirror Mountain stone wall. What's going on? Everyone looked over to the stone wall in surprise. They then watched as the stone wall emitted a never-before-seen light that glowed over Yi Futian's body. A fifth noble figure had not appeared on the wall. However, the four original figures had actually moved. They circled on the stone wall and moved in four directions. Then, they all headed toward the faint image of the fifth figure in the center, and at the very end, they formed a single noble. A bright light exploded from this new figure. The stone seemed to be taking shape. Following that, the light gathered into a single ray that shined out of the stone wall. A small stone figure floated in front of Yi Futian. Within this small stone figure seemed to be the purest noble will. This. Everyone was surprised and then shocked when they realized that the Mirror Mountain stone wall had dulled and its shine was no more. It was not just because the noble figures had disappeared. It was more like the entire stone wall was different. It could not go back to the way it used to be. The stone wall no longer contained powerful noble will. What did he do? Everyone stared dead at Yi Futian. Indeed, the fifth noble figure had not appeared, but Yi Futian somehow managed to dull the Mirror Mountain stone wall. Just then, nobles from the great powers of the Eastern Barren territory suddenly lost their view of the ancient barren world's Mirror Mountain. Their spells seemed to have diminished. He'd ordered Minister Hua to personally capture Yi Futian, but who would have guessed that he could escape? His talent was beyond expectation too. But Emperor Luo didn't regret anything. All of this was fated. Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu were destined to become his enemy. He was just overly confident back then. He didn't think that he could send out an order as an emperor but still have Yi Futian escape. Thankfully, that was impossible now. Ignoring Emperor Yi, Emperor Luo strode forward coldly, walking to the palace. Presumptuous. Sword intent flowed. The palace was instantly enveloped by an extremely strong sword aura. Emperor Yi shot into the air and blocked Emperor Luo's path. They were at a stalemate with swords unsheathed. At that moment, someone walked over from the distance. It was a young man in the Arcana plane. When he appeared, there was faint arrogance in his eyes, even when faced with people of the noble plane. They were only kings of small lands and he looked down on them. The royal Xian temple orders the Kangyi kingdom to immediately hand them over. Otherwise, you will pay for your actions, the man said arrogantly to Emperor Yi. The other emperor's eyes immediately hardened. With support from the royal Xian temple, there was nothing to fear. The young man gazed at them coolly and turned to leave. He didn't care about these things. If not for his junior sister, he wouldn't even come to such a barbaric place. His words might seem arrogant and almighty, but he didn't feel that great. There was nothing to be proud of for the royal Xian temple to threaten a small country. Did you hear clearly? Emperor Luo threatened coldly. I don't care if you're hiding Nanda's traitors. But now, I personally came to your palace to take them away. If you still stop me, you are treating all of us as enemies. Think clearly. With that, Emperor Luo walked out. The other emperors followed behind Emperor Luo. One said, Emperor Yi, why do you do this for outsiders? If we go to war, this palace will be the first to be destroyed. Is it worth it? Can you fight against the royal Xian temple's order? another emperor said as they all stepped into the palace. Emperor Ye's expression was uncomfortable. At the Tingfeng banquet last time, he only faced Emperor Luo by himself. If Emperor Luo didn't care, then he didn't care either. But now, he faced pressure from all the emperors and even the royal Xian temple. He either had to give in or declare war. If war was declared, the first to be destroyed was the palace and the people inside. It was unclear if even he could survive. Halt! A group came from the distance. Everyone turned to see the group. Yi Shao was at the front and he was the one who spoke. Behind him were some strong cultivators of the palace. Hua Fenglu, Yi Xiang, and the others were there too. "We'll hand them over," Yi Shao said to Emperor Luo. Emperor Yi looked over, his eyes sharp. "What did you do?" he demanded. Chapter 213, Does Your Father Know? Chapter 213, Does Your Father Know? The Kunpeng zipped through the air and was now even closer to the palace. Yi Futian's eyebrows furrowed. "What's going on?" "It's a confrontation." "Looks like the beginning of a fight," said a noble from the side. Yi Lingxi and Yi Danchen also furrowed their brows in confusion. A fight at the Kangyi Palace? If it had to do with the palace, then it had to be something big. At this time, both sides had already pulled swords at the palace. Emperor Yi had also been persuaded by Yi Xiang and Hua Fenglu. In their current situation, resistance would only get them all killed. Yi Futian, Hua Jieyu, and the others were in the ancient barren world and would end up without anyone to help them. Many people from various great powers of the Kangyi kingdom were also gathered around the palace. Powers like the Kangyi College, the Qin clan, as well as other clans, stood witness to everything that happened. They were flooded with emotion as they never thought their country would end up in such a situation. Yi Futian was indeed a rare genius in the 100 Lands, but what had he brought to the Kangyi kingdom? Was his arrival a blessing or a curse? At the moment, it was a curse in the eyes of many. Yi Futian himself was in a lot of trouble. Students of the Kangyi College such as Wu Qianfan and Yu Jiang, as well as Bai Qiu and others from the Qin clan were all participants of the Fenghua banquet alongside Yi Futian. Not only them, but many others had personally witnessed Yi Futian's performance at the banquet. He was a glory plane cultivator who defeated those in the Dharma plane. He was powerful. But Luo Junlin was able to enter the royal Xian temple. How domineering! No matter how gifted Yi Futian was, this seemed to be the end for him. There was no chance for him to keep growing. Yi Xiang, Hua Fenglu, and the others walked forward. Beside Hua Fenglu was Nandu Wenin and Tang Lan. He looked over at them and smiled. "I'm sorry that both of you have suffered by being with me. We went through tough times like this all those years ago. It doesn't bother me anymore. As long as Jieyu and Futian are well, I am content," Nandu Wenin said as she held Hua Fenglu's hand. "I'm jealous," Tang Lan said with a teasing smile. Hua Fenglu smiled and held her with his other hand. Tang Lan resisted a little but quickly gave up and allowed Hua Fenglu to hold her hand. They didn't bring any of their juniors as this was basically giving their lives away. Just them was sufficient. Emperor Luo and his people smiled coldly at this sight. In the end, they had complied. A chilling breeze blew over from afar. "What is that?" asked one of the emperors as he lifted his head to look into the sky. His utterance caused many people to look in the same direction. The wind was blowing stronger and more intensely. However, the winds were not due to a change in the weather. It was a large demon beast, flying over in their direction. The weird winds blew over the people. Even Emperor Yi looked over at the large beast in the sky. The beast was enormous. It was a top-level demon beast, the Kunpeng. Yi Xiang, Hua Fenglu, and the others stopped in their tracks. When they noticed that everyone else was focused on the skies above, they turned their attention in that direction as well. Above the imperial palace was the Kunpeng. With every flap of its giant wings, the sea of clouds seemed to part, making way for the ferocious beast. The aura of this beast was also extremely terrifying. A noble beast. Everyone felt a shiver down their backs. A noble Kunpeng had appeared in the Kangi kingdom. Who else had arrived? Far away, at the top floor of a restaurant, Luo Junlin and Shiro were drinking wine happily. However, their expressions changed as soon as they took notice of the Kunpeng's appearance in the distance. Does the Royal Xian Temple have a Kunpeng? Luo Junlin asked Shiro. No. They were both from top forces. The Lu Kingdom wouldn't declare war on the Royal Xian Temple for an outsider. Yi Futian looked at Shiro and then at Luo Junlin beside her. In Donghai, you were the prince and told me to cultivate with you. But after returning to the palace, you still tried to kill. Now that you've joined the Royal Xian Temple, you still think about me. Do you fear me that much? Luo Junlin's face darkened. Fear? He truly did have some fears. Otherwise, he wouldn't join the Royal Xian Temple and use their power to kill Yi Futian. And you even take advantage of a woman to use their power, Yi Futian scoffed. And that woman is just as egotistical as you once were. You two really do match. Take advantage? Shiro's heart trembled. She thought back to the moments with Luo Junlin. Even when Luo Junlin wanted her to do something, she would do it voluntarily. Just like coming here, she'd brought it up first. Yi Futian didn't look at them. Instead, he looked up at the other emperors and sneered. Are you really not going to settle this today? The emperors all stiffened. The Lu Kingdom and Royal Xian Temple were at the same level. Emperor Luo had the Royal Xian Temple behind him, so Yi Futian couldn't mess with him. But what about them? If Yi Futian used the Lu Kingdom to fight them, what would be the consequence? Shiro looked at Yi Futian. He may be talented enough to join the Lu Kingdom, but as a junior, was he able to be so arrogant? He even looked down on the Royal Xian Temple. She said coldly, from now on, you will all be protected by the Royal Xian Temple. Each one can choose someone to cultivate there. When Shiro said that, she looked directly at Yi Futian. There were many talents in the Eastern Barren Territory, but none dared to overlook her like that. Lu Feiyang could, but who did Yi Futian think he was? Thank you, miss. The emperors bowed in reply. They were reassured now. They were worried that they would be abandoned. Since the Royal Xian Temple would protect them, Yi Futian wouldn't do too much even with the Lu Kingdom's help. So you don't plan on settling this? Yi Futian didn't look at Shiro. He still gazed at the emperors. They fell silent. If they settled it, they didn't know what kind of consequence they would suffer. Now that the Royal Xian Temple would protect them, they'd obviously follow the temple. I see. Yi Futian smirked and turned towards Shiro. I hope you can represent the Royal Xian Temple. With that, he turned around the Hua Fenglu and the others. Master, let's go back first. All right. Everyone nodded. They gazed at Emperor Luo's group and turned to leave. Yi Futian had now joined a top force. Emperor Luo couldn't do anything to him. This crisis was dissolved just like that. Everyone returned to the palace. Lu Feiyang smiled at Shiro and said, I hope you ask your dad before you make any decisions in the future. Lu Chenyu also looked coolly at Shiro. The group left as if nothing had happened. Earlier, they'd been about to fight, but now, everything was calm again. Shiro's features were twisted. Lu Feiyang mocked her multiple times. He didn't take her seriously at all. As the daughter of the Royal Xian Temple's fifth lord, why would she ask her father about something like this? Would there be problems? Luo Junlin asked quietly. Don't worry. I'm here. Shiro gazed at Luo Junlin. The intimidating girl suddenly seemed so gentle. Thank you. Luo Junlin's eyes were apologetic as he took her hand. The other emperors saw this and their eyes brightened. Shiro and Luo Junlin's relationship was better than they'd expected. Now that they'd wronged Yi Futian, they had no choice but to follow Luo Junlin. "Let's go back," Luo Junlin murmured. "No, go back to the hotel," Shiro said. "I'd like to see what the Lu Kingdom can do for them." Luo Junlin's eyes flashed and he nodded. They would live in the hotel and see whether the Lu Kingdom would leave. Since Yi Futian joined the Lu Kingdom, Shiro wouldn't do anything to the Kangyi Kingdom. Otherwise, they might do the same to the Nanda nation. She couldn't do that. But she could at least give some pressure. After Yi Futian and the others entered the palace, Emperor Yi was still unsettled. The Lu Kingdom and Royal Xian Temple were all top forces. If they really clashed directly, they wouldn't have any problem, but the Kangyi Kingdom might be hurt in the process. This was also why Yi Futian didn't cause too much problem. After all, Lu Feiyang was just escorting him back. He didn't join the Lu Kingdom and wasn't anything to them. He had to right to make them fight another top force. Even Lu Feiyang couldn't make that kind of decision. "Thank you all for resolving this crisis," Emperor Yi said to Lu Feiyang. "You're welcome," Lu Feiyang said. "Thank you for not minding our disturbance." "I shall order a banquet right this moment," Emperor Yi said. "There's no hurry. There might be more people coming later. You won't have time to show your hospitality to us," Lu Feiyang said, chuckling. When they departed, the other top forces should have started departing too. The Kunpeng was fast, but the others weren't much slower. They would arrive in the Kangyi Kingdom soon. "More people will come." Emperor looked at them in doubt. "Father, Kangyi might get busy," Yi Lingxi whispered. "What do you mean?" Emperor Yi didn't understand. "You'll see later." Yi Lingxi smiled, raising the suspense. Emperor Yi gave his daughter a look. This girl was rarely like this. Was something else about to happen? "Aren't you going to say something?" Yi Xiang asked Yi Futian. He seemed to have sensed something odd. "I don't know either." Yi Futian shrugged. He really didn't know what would happen next. He'd entered the ancient barren world and did what he could for this. He didn't know who else would come. He could only wait and see. "I would have forgotten had you not brought it up," laughed Lu Feiyang. He then turned to Lord Yi beside Yi Wuchen and bowed his head in respect. "Greetings to Uncle Yi." Lord Yi was dazed. Was the Prince of Lu bowing to him? "Qinyu, aren't you going to greet your elders?" Lu Feiyang looked to his younger sister beside him. Lu Qinyu felt so wronged, but there were also many people looking at her. She couldn't be the one to dampen the atmosphere. Thus, she had no choice but to bow respectfully and say to Lord Yi, "Greetings to Uncle Yi." Lord Yi could not stop blinking. He was still in a stupor. "Lord Yi, wouldn't it be better to have some sort of welcome gift at a moment like this?" asked Yi Futian, contributing to the chaos. "That's enough from you," Lu Qinyu said through her tightly clenched teeth. She glared at Yi Futian with rage in her eyes. Yi Futian's lips curled into a big smile. This was what she got for laughing at him. "You are too polite," Lord Yi said with his hands joined together in front of him. His eyes drifted onto Yi Wuchen beside him. He thought, so, my son lost his arm but is now in some sort of relationship with the Lu princess? Spectators did not want to watch any longer. This was just Yi Futian teasing Lu Qinyu, but could there actually be something going on here? Regardless of all this, the prince and princess of the Lu Kingdom seemed to have a better relationship with Yi Futian than anyone anticipated. If Yi Futian had simply joined the Lu Kingdom, he wouldn't have such high status. They were playing around like friends. "Futian, you must have been through quite a lot in these past months. You've gotten so thin," Nanda Wenin said softly. "Yeah, there's something around every corner in the ancient barren world. I've faced many challenges," Yi Futian nodded immediately. "Indeed, Masteress is the only one who cares. It's almost the end of the year, stay until after the New Year's." Nanda Wenin knew that Yi Futian probably was not going to stay here with them. All right, he nodded. And then after New Year's, Master and Masteress can come with us to the Eastern Barren Territory. Together, murmured Nanda Wenin. Yi Futian had just gone to the center of the Eastern Barren Territory and was not yet established. It wouldn't be easy. Yeah, Jieyu and I still have to take care of you guys, nodded Yi Futian. Shameless, thought Lu Chenyu. This jerk was such a brown-noser. No wonder he was able to trick his master and masteress into giving him the hand of their daughter. Nanda Wenin glanced at Hua Fenglu, who said, "You should take care of yourself first, don't worry about us. If you guys are willing to come to the Lu Kingdom, then you will be my family as well." Lu Feiyang picked just the right time to throw in his bait. Although he wasn't going to force Yi Futian and the others into anything, it wouldn't hurt to try since they were already here in Kangyi. "I still think it would be better to find the princess a husband from our group," Yi Futian said with a smile. This confused everyone even more. So, Yi Futian and the others hadn't agreed to join the Lu Kingdom? If so, then why did the powerful Lu cultivators escort them back to Kangyi? Just as they were chatting, a few forces of incredibly strong sword intent appeared in the skies a distance away from the imperial palace. So quickly, they seemed to be whistling in the clouds. In an instant, everyone around the palace could feel the sword intent in the sky and couldn't help but look up. Such strong sword intent, everyone thought in shock. At the hotel where Emperor Luo and his people stayed, Hishiro and everyone else looked up as well. What was going on? "Noble sword intent," said a noble standing behind Hishiro. And not just one. After he had spoken, a few rays of immensely bright lights from a sword split through the clouds and drifted down. Multiple figures appeared, riding on their swords. Their eyes swept down and into the direction of the Kangyi Palace. At the feast in the palace, Emperor Yi, who was also a swordsman, could feel it too. His head lifted to the sky and his heart skipped a beat. So strong, even stronger than his own sword intent. Who was coming this time? Lu Feiyang looked into the direction of the newcomers and thought, "They're here." He was a little surprised. It had actually been the Futian sword clan who had arrived first. The blades of light arrived outside the palace. The members of the Futian sword clan remained in the air as they spoke. "The Futian sword clan has come to pay the Kangyi kingdom a formal visit." The voices pierced through the air like a sword and spread all around, sending shivers down everyone's spine. Seated at the top level of the hotel, Hishiro stood abruptly, heart pounding. Luo Junlin, as well as Emperor Luo and his people, felt the same way. In the past, the royal Xian temple had arrived in the Nanda nation and that was the turning point of Luo Junlin's life. Oh, the glory! But how was the attitude of the royal Xian temple back then? And how was the attitude of the Futian sword clan now? The clan had come to pay the Kangyi kingdom a formal visit. The feeling that something bad was going to happen grew stronger and stronger in the emperors of the various countries seated around. Emperor Yi stood. His sharp eyes looked outside the palace. The Futian sword clan had come to visit. "Let's go." Emperor Yi prepared to go welcome them. "Your Majesty," Yi Futian called out. Emperor Yi looked at him, confused. "Ask them why they have come from here," Yi Futian said calmly. Had it been any other top power, he wouldn't have stopped Emperor Yi, but because it was the Futian sword clan, it was better to ask first. "Ask from here?" Emperor Yi looked at Yi Futian in surprise. Everyone at the feast looked at him as well. What on earth did this guy do in the ancient barren world? Chapter 216, Each Party Arriving. Chapter 216, Each Party Arriving. Yi Futian saw Emperor Ye's suspicious expression and nodded. "Your Majesty, please believe me." "All right." Emperor Yi nodded. He gazed outside the palace and declared, "For what reason did you come to my Kangyi?" The Futian sword clan stood outside the palace. Hearing Emperor Ye's voice, one of them said, "The 7th summit of the Futian sword clan is here to invite Yi Wuchen to cultivate with us." His voice rolled through the vast space. So many hearts trembled at that moment. At the seats in the palace, the lord beside Yi Wuchen trembled, his face turning red. The Futian Sword Clan, a top force from the Eastern Barren Territory, came for his son. The leader of the 7th Summit had personally sent out the invitation for Yi Wuchen. Luo Junlin had been so mighty in the 100 Lands. Back then, the royal Xian temple had arrived and stayed in the air to call for Luo Junlin to go there. All of Kangyi was shocked too. Emperor Yi looked at Yi Wuchen. His left arm was missing, but he was still quiet. However, his eyes had changed. Before, Yi Wuchen was only a top talent of the Kangyi kingdom. No one expected the Futian Sword Clan's leader could invite him. Not only there, at the hotel, Shiro's eyes hardened and Luo Junlin shuddered. As for the others, they heard a boom inside their minds as if the sky was cracking. The Lu kingdom had escorted Yi Futian's group here. Their relationship went without saying. Now, the leader of the Futian Sword Clan invited Yi Wuchen to cultivate with them. If Yi Wuchen agreed, another disciple of a top force would be born in the Kangyi kingdom. There were many people gathered around the palace at the moment. All the strong cultivators and civilians of the Kangyi kingdom were shaken. Many eyes at the banquet area were trained on Yi Wuchen. Right now, he seemed like the star. What do you think? Yi Wuchen looked to Yi Futian, wanting to know what he thought. The 7th Summit of the Futian Sword Clan. Yi Futian's eyes flashed and he looked to Lu Feiyang and Lu Qinyu. He was quite surprised that the first to arrive would be the Futian Sword Clan, and for Yi Wuchen, at that. He wasn't too familiar with them, but Lu Feiyang must know. The Futian Sword Clan has 7 summits with a leader for each, Lu Feiyang said. The Royal Xian Temple's leaders are ordered by ability, but in the Futian Sword Clan, each summit is different. The 7th summit specializes in killing, especially in the killing sword techniques. According to rumors, the 7th summit leader is second only to the clan leader, the leader of the 1st summit. Li Daoyun is from the 1st summit. Yi Futian's eyes flashed. He stood up and said, "Let's go out." Emperor Yi felt this way too. No one wanted to feast anymore. They all walked towards the lights outside the palace. The nobles of the Futian Sword Clan were still hovering on the swords in the sky outside the palace. A short while later, they saw the comers. Many people were gathered there, all looking at the palace. In fact, Shiro and Emperor Luo's groups had come too. They wanted to witness this with their own eyes. "I am Yi Futian." "Greetings, seniors," Yi Futian bowed. The 7th summit of the Futian Sword had come as guests. He must be respectful. "I am sure you know about the conflicts between Yi Wuchen and Li Daoyun. How will you settle this?" he asked, looking up. "Li Daoyun is the disciple of the 1st summit. We are from the 7th summit," one man said. "Our leader wishes to invite Yi Wuchen to cultivate. As for the conflicts, those are their private matters. The Futian Sword Clan will not get involved. Yi Wuchen is talented with the sword. We are the most suitable for him." "Thank you for your answer." Yi Futian nodded and smiled at Yi Wuchen. He said, "Wuchen, I'm sure you've made a decision." Yi Wuchen's eyes flashed. He was a pure swordsman and was obviously interested in swordsmanship. Like Yi Wuchen, Hua Jieyu would depart at the beginning of the year. The Moon Clan departed. Yi Wuchen and Hua Jieyu had all chosen clans. You were with them too. How come no one came for you? Lin Yueyao's father asked from the back of the crowd. They were an important family of Kangyi, but now, he was jealous. "I'm not his girlfriend." Lin Yueyao thought of how Yi Futian had gently taught Hua Jieyu at the Mirror Mountain stone wall and glared in their direction with resentment. "Don't get involved," her father cautioned. Her words were a little strange. Even though his daughter was the #1 beauty of the Kangyi kingdom, she couldn't keep someone like Yi Futian. Putting Hua Jieyu to the side, even the witch of the witch clan couldn't do it, so how could Lin Yueyao? The witch's features were equal to Lin Yueyao and had made many men fall for her charms. Yi Futian. At that time, the cultivators who came in chariots walked over. The leader was dressed elegantly. He said, "I come from the Qin dynasty to invite you and Yu Sheng to join us. If you accept, your status will be equal to that of a prince. Unfortunately, you have a lover. Otherwise, we can also choose a princess to marry below her rank." Yi Futian's eyes brightened. There were so many temptations today. Hua Jieyu smiled at him. Was he tempted again? Of course, if you have any other requests, please say them. Anyway, do not be worried of restrictions in the Qin dynasty, the man continued. The top talents of the Eastern Barren territory were unwilling to join kingdoms because of the restrictions. They could never be equal to the royalty and it was difficult to forge closer relationships. Thus, this man tried to dissolve Yi Futian's worries in that aspect. The Qin dynasty once ruled the Eastern Barren territory. They kept their downfall close to heart. They absorbed talented people each generation to continue improving. A kingdom is a kingdom nevertheless. No matter what treatment he receives, he'll never have the surname of Qin, someone said. The Qin dynasty cultivator frowned and glared at the speaker, someone from the Donghua clan. Yi Futian, the Donghua clan is close to the #1 force in the Eastern Barren territory. Different from the kingdom, once you join the Donghua clan, you'll be one of the core members, the Donghua clan member said. In the ancient Barren world, our junior disrespected you, but with your talent, you mustn't hold grudges with someone of the same generation. Rather, you should surpass them. Yi Futian glanced at him. He'd once asked Tang Yi from the college whether he could represent the college. Hua Qingqi was the same, of course. He couldn't represent the Donghua clan, so Yi Futian didn't mind. The Donghua clan's words were still meaningful. Of course, you can also make any requests you'd like, the man said. #1 clan. With your foundation, you're still lacking, the Qin dynasty cultivator mocked.